I bring you greetings from Montgomery, Alabama, the cradle of the Confederacy, the birthplace of the modern civil rights movement, the heart of Dixie. We have a lot of monikers. I'm an interloper. I grew up in the Midwest, but wanted to live and teach in the South because for me, the things that made African-American history or Black history alive and vibrant and was Southern rooted. And so I wanted to live here and teach here, and haven't regretted a single moment. And so I'm happy to participate in this conference. I'm happy to share my thoughts with you. My haiku, I don't really have a haiku. I will say this, my favorite line from Julie Dash's Daughters of the Dust is when the matriarch of the movie says to her son, "It is up to the living to keep the memory of the dead alive." And I think of that often as I do my work. The other line that I think of is in Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man, where in the prologue, the protagonist says, "I'm not invisible because I don't exist. I'm invisible because you refuse to see me." And so, you know, I see my work partly as witnessing. I see my work partly as sort of speaking for people who are no longer here to speak for themselves. And you know, I live in Alabama. I live in Montgomery, Alabama. And so this is where the rubber meets the road. You know, there's no veneer here. It's real. And so, you know, I've lived here since '96. And so when I moved here, I was referred to as a Yankee. Now I'm referred to as a damn Yankee. So I've been elevated.
Well, should we, let's open your deck up and just have an introduction. You could go to the next slide.
Show the video.
Yep. Okay. We're just meditating. Okay.
This project is a project that is about changing this narrative. The soil that you collect will not only go as part of this exhibit, it will also be used to make a memorial. We've now bought some land here in Montgomery where we hope to build a memorial to the victims of lynching.
His name is Joe Souls. He was killed in Benton, and he was beat to death by 5 white men. But they wanted him to essentially admit to stealing cows that he had never stolen. So, because he didn't admit to something that he didn't do, he was persecuted for owning his own land. And it says they didn't fear any legal repercussion for their actions, which is why they just so senselessly went about this. Ready to collect some dirt?
These are open cases. These are cold cases. And there's no finality. There's no closure if we don't acknowledge these crimes. If we don't force counties and states and cities to concede that these crimes did occur.
Dorothy Fork?
I don't know that Dorothy would know, but I knew people who lived know anything about her family.
Let's say a prayer, Tom.
Okay, go ahead.
Our Father in heaven, we pause so very briefly this morning to remember and to memorialize a man whom we did not know, but in so many ways a man whom we do know. We pray that the sacrifice that he so involuntarily made strengthens us, edifies us, and helps us to move forward in a way that will prevent this ever from occurring again. Amen.
Mr. Isaac, I hope now all your body is at peace and you at peace. I came here today to hopefully I can get your DNA and take it to a place where you'll be respected. Not leave your DNA on this roadside in Montgomery, Alabama.
It's a confrontation because you are confronted with truth in a visual way that is undeniable. For all I know, some of the very dirt we dug was there. What if this dirt could talk? I thought the digging on that soil was a poignant way to connect with the time, the event, and most importantly, the man.
Thank you, Igor. If you could just rest the slide on that first one, which is a quote from Brian Stevenson. It's right before. Yeah, perfect. Thank you. And then Dr. Moten, if you would like to speak.
Yeah, and so I'm very happy that we have this memorial here in Montgomery, Alabama. And that memorial is the Memorial for Peace and Justice. And I'm so grateful that Brian and the Equal Justice Initiative attorneys and staff were insistent that this memorial was created. But there are a few things that I often talk to my students about that I'd like to share with you. One is that there's no statute of limitation for murder in the United States. Most of these cases are cold cases. They're unsolved. The perpetrators of these crimes have not been brought to justice, and in most cases, they probably cannot be brought to justice because they are now deceased. So that's one thing. The other thing is that my wife and I collected soil for a 17-year-old by the name of Ottis Parham, who was really a victim of circumstance. He was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and he was shot by a mob who was looking for somebody else. There's no obituary for Ottis Parham. There's no death certificate in Alabama for Ottis Parham. And this is not unique to Alabama. If you consider the persons that have been lynched in the United States, in many of those cases, probably in the vast majority of those cases, there was no death certificate produced to give the cause of death for these persons that were lynched. The other thing I'd like to point out is that we have never had a federal statute against lynching. And you probably know that Senator Kamala Harris and Senator Cory Booker sponsored a bill in the United States Senate, but that bill never really came to a vote because it was filibustered by a couple of other senators in the Senate. Lynching is the reason why my wife and I participated in the soil collection project is because, as I said, I grew up in Indiana. My wife grew up in Maryland. In Baltimore, I grew up in Gary. But one of the things that we both knew almost immediately, in fact, one of the reasons why the South attracted me, is that there is a certain memory or historical memory that the South really wants to hold on to. And that memory is largely false. And so, you know, we don't miss opportunities to visit plantations and visit historical battlefields because we want to tell a counter narrative. And I think that's one of the things that Brian wants to do, is to tell a counter narrative. Because I really don't think, and I believe Brian feels this way too, that you can't understand injustice in the United States if you don't understand the history of the United States, because we didn't just become an unequal society. Some people would argue we began as an unequal society and continue as one. And so the last thing I want to say, I want to talk about Monroe work at Tuskegee Institute, who directed the Department of Records and Research, who began collecting statistics on lynchings at the turn of the century. And Tuskegee became a clearinghouse for lynching statistics in the United States. And so I think Monroe work epitomized what Ralph Ellison meant, which, as you know, was the story itself. Tuskegee was played a prominent role in that story. That I'm not invisible because I don't exist. I'm invisible because you refuse to see me. And I think I see my work, and I urge my students to use their talents and their skills to make sure that they make visible people that other folks refuse to see. Thank you.